You know, really, it's impossible to say anything about America without making a complete fool of oneself. The country is so big and so varied, its topography, textures, that when you focus in on any one place, say Pueblo Indians in New Mexico or Arizona, you immediately lose the Italians in New York or Florida, the Pennsylvania Dutch, the Germans in Montana, the Creole in Louisiana. What about the Irish in Boston, Jews in Hollywood, or African Americans in Chicago and everywhere else? We Canadians, well, we have a love-hate relationship with the Americans. Our culture, such as it is, begins with that heady mix of the UK and the USA. Even as a kid and a teen, I read the novels of Americans, watched the movies of Culver City, and danced to the music of Little Richard, the Gershwins, and Glenn Miller. Elvis and the Beatles didn't spring forth from wheat fields in Saskatchewan, no sir. So many movies that I love and books that I devoured were set in New York. So many that with the tangy soup of immigrants from Eastern Europe who inhabited my neighborhood, I often thought, I was convinced of it, that I lived in Brooklyn or the Bronx most of my life. And most of my life, many Canadians assume that I am a Yankee or even specifically a New Yorker. Americans have the rightful reputation of being the most generous and open people in the world. When you meet folks from Minneapolis, Philadelphia, or Oakland traveling in Italy, for example, they seem to fall quickly into one of two categories: warm, friendly, interested, and informed on the one hand, and all the opposites on the other. This may be terribly unkind, and probably it's, true of people from all over the world. But Americans are perceived, rightly or wrongly, as loud and insistent. So when they're good, they're very, very good. And when, well, So many Americans have moved to Canada for one reason or another who have been stellar contributors to their adopted country. Here in Vancouver, for example, we've been blessed with city planners, architects, musicians, doctors, athletes, and theater directors who have lifted both their own professions and the neighborhoods in which they've settled to wonderful new degrees, way out of proportions to their small numbers. It is we Canadians who often dash off to New York, Dallas, and Los Angeles hunting for bigger and better opportunities. So we tend to forget too often how many Americans have really found their homes right here. A friend of mine who is brilliant and rich and speaks at least 5 languages very fluently, and he's terribly funny and widely informed, loves to remind me with punitive regularity, never forget, David, Canada is a B movie. Alas, it's true. We're getting better, but we still look south of the border for hints about clothes and food and how to behave and not behave in public. Pickle. America is flat crazy, and it's wonderful. It's not called the Excited States for nothing.